Randy McLean. I have Bruce Merrifield with me. Good morning, Bruce.
Hello, Randy. Good morning, everybody.
Through the miracle of technology, Bruce is in Boston this morning, and I'm in Phoenix. And we have the ability to talk to all of you, wherever you are. We're going to have a lot of fun in the next 90 minutes. I've got some very interesting things, some of which you'll know and some of which will be new. And I'm thrilled to be in the position of being able to share these things with you. The topic today, of course, is quantum sales compensation. And what it does is gives us an ability to design and build new kinds of compensation programs which have a direct and powerful connection to our ability to generate profits in the company. So what we'll do is get started. I've got a few housekeeping things first. We have Bruce Merrifield with us. Bruce is one of the deep thinkers of best practices in the distribution market space. He started his career as a turnaround specialist and spent the better part of a decade doing turnarounds on distribution companies, and then bought and turned around his own distribution company, something that a couple of decades later is still in the family and being run by his brother, and has grown from a tiny company to a good-size player. In the meantime, Bruce has spent the last 2+ decades sitting on the boards of major distribution and other companies, and flying around the planet speaking and writing on best practices in distribution. My name is Randy McLean. I am the developer and creator of WayPoint Analytics. It's an online package for distributors that helps companies have a very close control and view into their profitability. I also spent a decade prior to this working in sales compensation for the Fortune 100. So we have a fortuitous coalescence of our relative skills into an area that can be very beneficial and very helpful for people that are dealing with the economy as it is now. What we're going to be doing in the next 90 minutes is we're going to talk about gross profit versus NBC compensation. NBC is net before comp, and it has a direct connection more to the bottom line profitability. We're going to take a look at how to do plan designs and give you the bullet points and some insight into how you can design your own plans when you have good information. We'll have a Q&A session at the end where people will be able to ask questions or get us to flesh out points that might not have been clear during the presentation. We'll have a brief look at WayPoint so you can see what it is that we're talking about, and we'll let you know what we're going to be doing with the follow-up. We will be sending everybody on the presentation a copy of the slide deck, so if you want to use the slides for representing or discussing some of the things that happened this morning with your own people, you'll have the tools and whatnot to do that. We're also going to send you a fair amount of resource information and give you access to some online information which will provide a great deal of detail on this, and will give anybody that has the intent and the energy and the time the ability to go ahead and do this with or without us. So you should get some very good value from having been here this morning. We will also offer you the opportunity for us to reprise this particular presentation for your own management teams if you think that that would be helpful in your own companies. And so there'll be some contact information you'll get with that. And don't be afraid to ask us to replay this if you have some people internally that you think you'd like to know about this. We'd be delighted to help in that way. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about today's environment. We're going to look at the deficiencies in the current practices, the benefits of designing an NBC comp plan, talk about how to design a plan, talk about the plan mechanics that you would use, and how to develop a transition plan to be able to act something that you decide that you want to take forward. I want to spend a few minutes just getting some of the vernacular down so that we have common terminology, or at least a common basis of terminology as we go through the session this morning. So looking at a typical P&L, there's some terms that we use that I just want to synchronize everybody on. As you can see, we have revenue, gross profit. Our revenue, we have some costs, which give us the gross profit, and some expenses, which give us the net profit. And walking around this, when I'm speaking this morning, when I talk about gross profit, I'm going to be talking about the gross profit dollars. When I want to talk about the rate of gross profit, I'll be talking about the gross margin percent. We'll also be, for reasons that'll be clear as we move through this, we're going to be isolating out the non-sales comp expenses and looking at the non-comp expenses separately from the compensation expenses. And we'll look at the total expense package, essentially everything on the P&L between the gross profit line and the bottom line. We'll be talking about that as cost to serve. The cost to serve is an important point because it really represents the total amount of money that your company invests to deliver your envelope of goods and services to your clients. And so cost to serve is a very important part of quantum profit management and management thinking for going forward. And finally, we'll be looking at net before comp, or NBC, net before sales compensation. So what we've done is we've excluded the sales compensation, but we've taken all the rest of the expenses and we've deducted the non-compensation expenses from the gross profit, leaving us with the amount of net profit that we would have if the sales force was free. Now, we don't intend to get the sales force for free, of course, but it's a useful metric to start thinking about how the profit's being divided up and what we can do going forward. One other element, I just want to go back to cost to serve for a moment, in case it hasn't been, it's not apparent to people. Really, when you're running the business, what you want to do is make sure that your cost to serve is less than your gross profit, or you want to invest less in selling your products and services than you can make in gross margin. Gross profit. So there's some net profit left at the bottom line. With WayPoint, we'll look at this in a granular level. We start looking at products or invoices or reps or territories and use those metrics to be able to assess the relative value of a customer or a line of business. Okay. I have some factoids for you at the beginning. We went back to the WayPoint universe. We have quite a number of companies that use our product WayPoint, and we have access to that great pool of data, and we were able to take a look at what the recent economy has done to people, and we had some pretty surprising conclusions that we could draw from the data. We looked at the non-sales comp expenses, and across the WayPoint universe, our customers cut the non-comp expenses between 2008 and 2009 by 17.6%. In the same time, in real dollars, the amount of sales comp that was paid dropped by only 1.8%. And we think that the reason that this has happened is because, of course, the economy has caused put a lot of pressure on people in the business. With your customer's business shrinking, then your business can't help but shrink. Everybody's been driven to take a very close look at their cost structure and to be able to drive as much cost out of the business as possible. We've had rounds of layoffs, business reductions, all kinds of things have gone on. I think that the reasoning has been that most of our sales forces are on some kind of incentive program that's linked to gross profits, and that our feeling was that as the sales dropped, the amount of compensation dollars would drop as well. But it turns out that there's more of the comp plan, or more of our sales that are not connected to the variable part of the comp plan, and that is causing us to have a lower amount of reduction there, and I think we really haven't reduced the sales force very much. When we take a look, what's backed up by some of our other factors, the other metric to look at, sales comp as a percentage of gross profit is actually up by 19.6%. And sales comp as a percentage of NBC, or net before compensation, is up by almost 21%. So one of the things that we conclude is that we haven't really done very much cost cutting in the sales force. Now, that's not to say that there aren't sales reps that are making less. I'm sure that there are. But I think there's enough of the sales reps' compensation that's protected from the reductions that we haven't really, that's offset the other reductions we've seen. Also, we know that the sales force has driven margins up a bit. Okay, moving on. I want to just briefly talk about what WayPoint does, because it's kind of crucial to our understanding of what we can look at today. WayPoint is a secure online system that we run for our clients. They give us the transaction data and their P&L data, and we integrate the P&L data back into transaction data. We take each part of the P&L and we integrate it back into the detailed granular level information. So on a particular invoice line, we not only know the revenue and the gross profit, but we also know how much commission was paid on that line, and that's accounted for. We know how much warehouse expense there was for that line, if any, and that's accounted for. How much fleet expense, how much assembly expense, how much G&A and other expenses that our clients have may not belong in the line, and greater or lesser amounts of those expenses might be there. They might have a warehouse that runs more efficiently, and that warehouse actually costs less per line, and so transactions that flow through that warehouse carry a lower burden for the warehouse cost. But every transaction in our customer's data pool carries the burden of the resources that line consumes. And so we have the actual net profit on every single line, and we can roll that up and we give the customers the ability to slice into it and see different SKUs, product lines, territories, reps, customers, products, what their comparative profitability is based on how they're delivered to the clients. I want to show you more about that. But if you'll allow me for the first part of this to just trust me when I say that we can give you the ability to know for sure, no fooling, how much profit you're making on a granular basis, then we have the ability to look at the results and what we can do with that information. Okay, Bruce, how would you like to tell us a little bit about the ranking reports and some of the tactics that are important?
Well, once you capture the profit or loss on a line item basis, you can sum those up in different ways. You can sum up the lines and say, did I make money on the order? You can sum up all the orders for a customer and say, did I make money on the customer? You can sum up the items and say, did I make money on the item? Did sum up the items by supplier and say, did I make money on the supplier? And all these things can be ranked. This particular report just shows that here's a guy with I think this client had about 800 customers or so, and the number one customer, going from left to right, you can see they had revenue, gross profit dollars. You subtract out all the cost to serve, and the key thing is to look at the net column. Made $119,000 on this customer. Which when you look at it as a return on sales, that's about 12%. Profit as a percent of sales. This overall company was averaging 2%, 1% maybe, and then it just accumulates the column. So you can see the next customer drops off a lot to 47,000 profit, but you add them together, you get 167, and so forth. And the red line just gets us to the bottom of the report. So at the bottom of the report, you have the biggest losing customer, where they lost 72,500. But go over and look at the margin dollars. Here's an account that had $61,000 in margin. If we're paying a sales guy 20% of the margin, he got $12,000 in commission for the company to actually lose $72,000. And if you said, we have all transaction activity costs, they do too. Actually, this is a lose-lose relationship. Let's go out and talk with them about rethinking how we buy and sell together and so forth. Salespeople freak out. It's like, I got $12,000 in the balance. Don't even think about going there. So we realized that when we pay on margin dollars, some of it's good, at the top. Some of it's obviously bad, and we're sort of a hit or miss, and we're locking ourselves into whatever we've been doing in the past. We cannot change anything. So we'll come back to this issue. Do you have a whale curve?
Yeah, I do. And just before we move off this, I wanted to make the point that as we're trying to manage the sales force to do things that affect the company the most, of course, where we make the most profits, we want to protect the accounts and penetrate them more deeply. And when we're losing the most money on an account, that's where we want to go and reform the business so we can find a more profitable way of structuring the business with that client so we lose less money, break even, or perhaps make money. And in a declining market where customers are buying less, it's hard to go to flog the sales force to go get more sales. But you can go get more profit by renegotiating how you do business. And I don't mean renegotiating the deals. I'm talking about just finding better ways to service the customers that don't consume as much in the way of resources. And so focusing on the top and the bottom of the list is where you get the big hits. And a guy that you're losing or making $6 on, putting a lot of effort into that isn't going to give you a big return. But if you keep people focused on protecting the best of the business and reforming the worst of it, you can generate big profits without changing sales at all.
Right.
Okay, so the whale curve you wanted to look at.
Yeah, all this is a graphic representation of that ranking report of customers we were looking at where, going from left to right, you can see customers, they got past 800 accounts there. We take the very first customer, they're $119,000 in profit, and then we add the next guy with about 50. You can see we're rapidly getting to our peak sort of true internal profits, which is about $1.2 million. But in the middle of it's called whale curve, and so on the long back of the whale, there are a lot of accounts that frankly are break even, and then there's some that we start to lose money on. But look at the tail of the whale. The general rule about the bottom 1% of any distributor's active accounts will destroy about 20% of the true peak profits. So very simply, we go to the extremes and we do tactical, innovative kinds of things. If you want to protect your very best customers at the head of the whale, you totally team sell them, you go in a little deeper, you find ways to tweak, tune things that make a lot of difference to the customer, and they buy 10, 20% more. Certainly you don't lose them. Along the big back of the whale, it turns out that a lot of these there are a lot of chronically small customers who aren't, business builders. They're just self-employed, just, taking up space in the ecosystem. And we have a service model that is the equivalent of giving free drinks to nickel slot players, and you can't make money if you do that. And so we have to come with a different service model for that huge crowd. And then at the tail of the whale, that's where, like we saw at the bottom of the report we're looking at, actually we're both creating enormous activity costs on both sides of the fence for not a lot of volume of product dollars or margin. So there's a mutual blind spot there 8 out of 10 times. How do we go out and convert a lose-lose relationship into a win-win? Or I call it, more generally speaking, channel friction, because you'll get exactly the same kind of curve for your suppliers. So you go to the tail of the whale suppliers and say, why? What's going on? How can we massively change this in some way? You go to the head of the supplier then and say, holy smokes, we're just pointing money at these guys. How do we sell them deeper, more thoroughly? And with right-click, dig deeper kinds of cross-reference analytics in our system, the patterns emerge and ideas come up. So we work with our partners to remove channel friction, which is a free lunch for everybody.
Right. And just as an example, in WayPoint we can pull a customer or product and whatnot, but we can see, how much gross profit was made. We can see where all the costs are. 13 orders picked at $8.61 an order, and so on. And we wind up with a typical money-losing customer where we got $1,500 in gross profit, got $1,900 in cost to serve, and wind up with $400 loss. And it's just that there's just too much activity required in the service model for the way that we work with this customer. If we can find some ways of cutting some of that out, we can recover those profits and get the customer into the black. And being able to dig into it and see what's actually going on a particular customer's losing money gives us the handle and gives the sales folks the handle to get into there and actually help drive the action in the right way. Okay, ultimately what's going on is all of our business big cross subsidies. We're essentially, here we have the fine dining category and we have 46 clients who make $199,000. Then we got the fast food sector, for instance. We're losing $233,000 serving them because of our dysfunctional service model. So every dime that we're making over here is flowing over to subsidize these guys. And I think most of us are sick of, customers sending us money and piling up in the warehouse, and we're paying our people to shovel it on the trucks and send it out to other customers. So what we really want to do is try and capture more of that profit and divert it back to the bottom line.
I might add, this is an actual case study that Randy was looking at where a distributor could break their customers into different segments, and it looked like food was losing money. But when they dug deeper, they said, wait a minute, we have two sub-niches here. One's actually making good money. The other one's got a real big structural problem. And what is that problem? Can we solve it? or do we have to exit, or is there a way we can joint venture with a fast food distributor who's got 95% of what the fast food guys want anyway, and we've got little 5% that they also need.
Yeah, and we do a whole series, another whole webinar series called Quantum Profit Management, which is basically new thinking and distribution management best practices. And one of the principles that we have there is illustrated by that exact thing. The customer would look at his information and see a $30,000 loss in one category and think, wow, that's not so great. But with WayPoint, he's able to dig deeper and find out it's actually made out of a $200,000 gain and a $230,000 loss. And by digging a little deeper into there, something was completely masked before is sort of revealed, and it gives them an ability to set an action plan to go do something about it. Bruce, do you want to talk about the 5x5?
Yeah, basically what happens is that when you start to look at whale curves, you realize, holy smokes, I've got a few very profitable customers. If I lost one of those guys, I am really toast. And then I've got a few that are just totally destroying me. And then somewhere in the mix, 1 to 3% of all American businesses in mature industries are perpetual innovators. And a guy named David Birch dubbed them gazelles. These are people that grow 2 to 5 times faster than their peer in their industry. They're making 4 to 6 times the return on investment. And if you can marry one of these guys, they keep growing like crazy, buying more stuff and paying their bills off like a slot machine. So obviously we'd want to marry the gazelles. We wouldn't want to lose our best ones, and the best defense is a good offense. Let's whole team focus and take that relationship to a next level and tweak all the touch points so that we really are giving sublime service, and in a sense find more mutual oversight business, so sell more to the core better in a way. And if you look down the left-hand side of this tracking report, what it does once a month is it says, all right, sales rep, here are your 5 most profitable customers. What are you doing, in the next month to take these guys to the next level? Next are your 5 most important target gazelle accounts. What are you doing to take those to the next level? And then here are your biggest losers, and what are you doing there to transform the lead to gold? On the right-hand side, we have accounts month over month who have grown the rep the most or declined the most, and we want to know what are the real reasons behind that. Obviously, the fast growers, we hope it's because of stuff we've been doing as opposed to they've all been put on trade credit, and now they're starting to buy from us and stick us with a loss. And certainly if a customer just stops buying from us, we want to go out right away and say, holy smokes, what happened? Better to try to get the course when he's 1 month out of the barn as opposed to a year and a half out of the barn. So this is sort of a high sensitive early warning set of accounts. So it's 25 sort of sales opportunities that focus you on the highest profit impact leverage accounts. There are many accounts we've all accumulated over time, which are, again, just this chronic small customer, small order, growing nowhere, don't have any more business to give you anyway kind of accounts. There's no leverage there. There's nothing we can do with them. So
right.
How do we focus in depth on a few important high leverage accounts and not get distracted trying to be all things to all people and get in an activity trap with A, B, C, D customers that I call in once a week, twice a week. The old time and territory management catechism from the 60s and 70s.
Right. Now we're about to tie this back into the main topic of today and how this impacts comp. But it's important to set the stage to understand the things that can be done that drive profits, even in an environment where it's very difficult to drive new sales. There's an awful lot that can be done to bolster the bottom line with the way that you approach your customers and your business. And so our purpose here is to sort of set the stage so we can tie this back in. So, Bruce, why don't you give them a quick overview of the kinds, and just a sampling of the kinds of tactics that a sales force or a company can use to generate new profits?
Well, let me just say it this way. When you start to look at ranking reports and you say, gosh, why are these super winners winners? Why? And get down to the real root cause or causes, and then, oh, okay, now that we have new insight, what should we do differently? And so, we've come up with sort of tactical, strategic, incremental, innovative kind of plays that you can do. And, if anybody's interested in more of the stuff, if you went to Merrifield.com and clicked on exhibits, key exhibits would be sort of 56 on.
Yeah, we'll give you the links for all of that at the end of the session, so you can go right there.
And there are a couple of, and they're enormously cookbook how-to kind of recipe solutions. But the problem is that's great, but how do we keep track of these different programs? And if you look at the 5x5 report, we just looked at the previous slide, that's a tracking report. That's a next level tool capability to monitor how you're doing on, delta PBIT improvement type of stuff. So anyway, we could spend a day and a half, a week on all these things if you wanted to.
Yeah, and in fact, we have another webinar series called the RPIs, or the Radical Profit Improvement Plays, where we actually go into detail and some depth in these things and give you the recipes and the overview for them so that you can start to implement them in your companies. And there'll be information on other webinars that'll come to you in the follow-up as well. At any rate, so here's our current state. Most of our information systems can provide granular information only at the gross profit level. Because of that, we tend to manage everything on gross profit. And frankly, that's been a good thing. My hat's off to the creative crowd that has, moved to be able to make the best of optimizing their businesses across time and have driven growth and shown leadership by thinking hard about how to do things the best possible way. And up until recently, gross profit really was it. So, of course, as a result, most companies use gross profit as the baseline for sales compensation. The problem is that gross profit doesn't reveal very much about the business. When you think about gross profit just by itself, all it really does is reflect pricing, the ratio of revenue to the cost of the actual product. That doesn't really bring any of the operating costs into the business. And back to that quantum profit management webinar that we give, one of the key principles there is that the gross profit rates, and the gross margin rates, and the gross profit dollars don't track very well with net profit. And so and as we started doing more research into this, I know that I'm a former CEO. I ran a business on gross profit, just like most of you probably have, and all my hair stood on end when I started to see the results of that, and I started to understand why a lot of the programs that I had implemented before would move the gross profit needle, or the gross margin needle, but didn't give me more bottom line. And the reason I now realize is because there was not a very close coupling between the gross profit line and the net profit line. And so sometimes my activities were actually counterproductive, but I had no way of knowing it. But, we got a pretty smart group, and many of you have realized that the gross profit was deficient or wasn't the whole picture. And a lot of companies have used other tactics to try and move effectively some of the operating expenses into the baseline they use for sales incentives. So people have used load factors where they say, a certain percent of our, let's put a 6% charge on everything we sell. That'll cover, some of our overhead. People have used commission clawbacks where they can say, the account is delinquent or it goes over 90 days, we'll pull the commission back. Some people have put in threshold minimums. And say, below a certain level, we don't pay commissions. We moved done a little bit of territory realignment. We moved some of the accounts into house accounts where we don't pay commission on them. That changes the cost structure of that piece of the business. Those are, pretty reasonable tactics and pretty creative in bringing a little bit more of the operational costs into the baseline for sales comp. And it's a great move, but wouldn't it be great to be able to go all the way?
I might add also, Randy, if you think about the spirit behind all these bells and whistles that start to get added on to, quote, straight commission of margin dollars, it's how do we control these salespeople? Because actually we're paying these guys to go get any kind of gross margin dollar, and they get a percent of it. Well, they're going to go get loser dollars. They're going to get some deadbeats. And they'll constantly pound on the company to have loose credit and lots of just-in-case special stock inventory that might be bought but isn't and accumulates there. They want extra services. They don't want to charge any fees for services, all those things. And everybody says, well, gosh, those guys are bad. They're trying to destroy our bottom line and balloon our balance sheet. No, they're just smart people doing what they're paid to be doing. And so then we say, well, all right, how do we flip them? How do we not pay so much? But as opposed to, well, wait a minute, how do we get the same view on company profitability and pre-tax return on total assets and have total harmony and alignment so that we can actually go out and go after customers in a way that's, increases sales compensation, company profits, and obviously value added for customers. We've got a misalignment here.
Absolutely. So this is what happens with a typical GP commission plan, and we just went and pulled a sampling of real data from the WayPoint universe, and what I've tracked here is on the left-hand side we have the invoice NBC, or the amount of net profit before we pay commissions, and then on the right-hand side we have the amount of commission dollars that we paid out. And this faint pink line here are actual data points from our data sample set, or from groups invoices in our sample set. And what you can see is that, with the vagaries of whatever we're doing, greater and lesser gross margin or gross profit, we pay more or less dollars. And to make it a little easier to follow, I just put a red trend line in here. And so what we can conclude by looking at this is that we have, and then we have the blue line here, which shows the actual NBC on the invoices. And we ranked all the invoices from the most profitable to the least profitable so we can see sort of what the curve is. And if we have an effective plan, what we want is we want the rep pay to sort of track with what the profitability is. And the more profit we have, the more we can share with the reps. And, by and large, everybody's done a pretty good job up at the upper end of the spectrum. More or less, we've come up with the right commission rates, the right factors, the right base salaries, the right everything that goes into this to make it, kind of reflective of what's going on. Unfortunately, as we get down into what, people have called the classic small order problem, and as we have invoices that go unprofitable because our service model is dysfunctional, we just basically spend more money to deliver to whatever it is to the customer than they're paying us in gross profit dollars. The lines start to diverge, and once they cross here, we sort of have a situation where we're continuing to pay the reps, even though we're making little money or we're losing money in the process. And so this has been the grand challenge of sales compensation forever, and up until now, we just didn't have any way of getting to it and solving the problem for real. So the detriments of gross profit compensation is disconnected from operating costs, and as Bruce said, there's lots of, we're basically incenting the reps to cause us, or to use their powers of persuasion to persuade us to drive dysfunction into our business. It also effectively puts a floor under compensation levels, because if you draw a graph of price ratios on any given invoice, you're going to sell a $100 cost of goods worth of stuff, and you can sell it $200 or $150, $125, $100, $75, $50. As that curve comes down, what happens is we get to the point where the gross profit goes to zero, or whatever your threshold is, and at that point the rep doesn't lose anything more. He just doesn't make any money. But as the curve continues, the company continues to lose more and more and more money on the deal. And so we effectively put a mathematical floor under the rep's earnings, because no matter how bad things go, the worst they can get to is zero. And that's not sure what anybody's intent was, but we don't think enough about what's going to go on when things go on the wrong side of the profit line. And it also winds up that what's going on out there is it's not synchronized with corporate objectives. We're all there to make sure that we're improving the profitability of the company. They're there, according to how we pay them, to generate as much gross profit as they possibly can so they can take a share of it home. And those are just not the same objectives. It also means that every account that a rep has is part of his paycheck. And even a guy that's contributing $2 of gross profit is something that matters to them, and they'll fight tooth and nail to hang on to those accounts, when really the accounts would be a lot better served another way. They wouldn't be a distraction for a good, capable sales rep that should be really working for some businesses a lot bigger than that. And you can change the service model by taking the rep commissions out of small accounts and make them profitable and let them focus on other things where they can make some real money. But your incentive plan essentially incents them to fight you on it. Okay, so we already talked about NBC, and basically the cool thing about NBC is if we start using that as a baseline. Remember, NBC is the net. We take the gross profit, we deduct all of the non-compensation expenses, and then we look at how much profit is being generated by the rep or in the territory. just for looking at it as if the sales force was free. So we can look at a company and see what they're making, and then what we do is we pay the sales force out of those profits, and we can figure out what the split is. So we have an effective rates report in WayPoint, and I'll show you what this is. We have the reps listed down the left-hand side. We have the net profits for the rep in this column here. Then we have the NBC for the reps. Then we have the amount of commissions that we paid for the reps. Then we have an effective rate, which shows us as a percentage of the, if we take the commission and divide it into the net profit, what percentage of, into the gross profit, what percentage of the gross profit is being spent on the reps in compensation costs. And then finally we do the same thing by dividing the compensation into the NBC to find out what the effective rates are there. And here's what we discover. In this little microcosm here for all reps, the company's spending 87.81% of all the NBC on compensation, sales compensation. And I know that the owners of this company, when they started the business, I know that they thought, gee, we're going to get big, we're going to hire sales reps, and we're going to share the profits with these guys that are helping us grow the business. I'm sure that they had no idea that for all the gray hair they get and going to the bank hat in hand and dealing with covenants and loans and sleepless nights when wanting to make payroll and that kind of thing, that they would be giving away most or all of the profits to the sales force, and I don't think that's their intent, and I know it's not yours either. But 88% is too much. And look what it's made up of here. We've got Min Fuller here, for example. He's running about 58, 59% of NBC. And by the way, that's a pretty reasonable number in the world as it is right now. And that's a reasonably good rep. We don't know he's our best rep, though, because he doesn't handle the biggest accounts and doesn't generate the most gross profit and doesn't take over the biggest commission checks. But he's right in the range. Meanwhile, Shiloh here is taking all of the profits out of her territory and more. She's taking 107% out. And it's the sum total of these kinds of territories really killing businesses. And so getting a handle on this in the beginning is very helpful in understanding what the dynamics are. And unfortunately, we have Joe Posey, who is our biggest guy, and he's making $65,000 commission for losing us $6,500 in his territory before we even pay him. And he's generating a massive loss in his territory. And he's our biggest volume rep, and he's the guy that gets all the accolades because his gross profits are good. But we just don't realize that the service model that he's driving has the company underwater, and this is really driving things away. Every company sees this, and this effective rates report is an eye popper for the management teams when they start looking at it. So now, what do we do about this? What we want to do is we want to get an NBC commission plan. And so I've put the same curves that we had a moment ago and overlaid a green line on this, which shows what an NBC plan would pay. And this is where we pay a commission that's based on the NBC profits rather than the gross profits. And so you can see it exactly tracks. And what's interesting is that this line goes negative on orders. There's two valuable aspects of this line. The first thing is that the commissions go negative when the profit goes negative. That means the reps will actually wind up with commission deductions when they're selling business on an unprofitable basis, and that's important. The second thing is we often use a threshold mechanic to not pay reps when the gross profit gets too small. But if the service model is good, those dollars are still valuable. The customers could still be profitable. And if they're only making $3 or $5 or $17 or something like that, we have an ability with this kind of program to still pay the rep a share on that without having this blunt instrument where we just sort of cut everything off below that and stop rewarding sales that are still worthwhile to the company. So in WayPoint, we have a desktop tool that the people that are responsible for managing the commissions can use, and what it does is it generates the commission reports. And I'll show you more about that in a few minutes. But this is a sample of what it does. It will go through and put together a report for each rep that you can send out with the commission check. And if you look at Vonda's report here, in November, here are her customers, here's what they bought, here's what the expenses were, and she now cares about that because it affects her NBC. And that's a very powerful thing. Right now, most people have reps driving as much business as they can, and we've all run into situations where something's gone off the rails and saying, well, they need it right away, send another truck, these kind of things. And the reps, really, we're paying them to waste our resources. It doesn't matter to them that we're going to send out 3 trucks, or we're going to do some exception process, or that we're going to allow the customers to order on a dysfunctional basis to operate with us. They can just sort of drive as much cost in the system as they want because they've got no skin in the game. As it is now, when they start being paid on NBC, all those things factor in. And wouldn't it be wonderful to have an account rep that says, what do you mean you sent that on an extra truck? It's going to hurt my commissions. Knock that off. So there's going to be a game-changing attitude adjustment that will go on when we're paying our most powerful and intelligent people to think about the things that we worry about. And so what happens here for Vonda is she's had a number of clients. They're all ranked on how much commission they generated for her. And at the bottom of the list, there's a couple of accounts here that just lost us money, and they lost her money too. And so now as a sales manager, our job converts from going after Vonda, trying to get her to do something about 7 savings without her having any vested interest in doing something, and we started to get this conflict going on where we're trying to drive her one way and we're paying her to go in the other. We can go back and say, hey, this thing at the bottom is costing us both money. Why don't we team up and see what we can do about it? And the sales management job becomes more of a coaching job, so we can get that loss off her list. Because it cost her $356 in November, right out of her paycheck, to have this customer doing business on a dysfunctional basis.
And incidentally, you can, do compensation programs in parallel. Just keep doing what you're doing, but start, managing and thinking and remedial activity and preventative stuff around this type of report. The goal is not to hurt the rep, to make sure, in many cases, that they would just really have no downside risk. But the only way they're really going to make more money is turning lead to gold, or figuring out how to increase what we call delta profit. In other words, get the profit from customers going up. And there are very few high leverage profit improvement accounts that you can really go after. So that's back to the 5x5 report and the plays that underlie that. Now all of a sudden the reps are going, well, what are those plays, and how do I learn about doing that a little more, and let's work together, et cetera. So we have total strategic alignment.
Absolutely. So the benefits are that we wind up, it accounts for the gross margin rates and all of the operating costs. So we bring the entire operating cost of the business into the baseline that we use for paying people. That has the result of completely synchronizing Salesforce objectives with corporate objectives. What we want, they want. What they want, we want. What works for us works for them, and vice versa. It's a win-win all the way through the range. And that's important because it scales to the whole performance range. When things are happening, they're losing us money, it's losing them money as well. And so 100% of the company can be on the same objective path. And it converts sales management into sales coaching. So we have a more peaceful and productive path that we can get on together while we get out there and work together to improve things together. And it engages the Salesforce brainpower in all aspects of what the company does. Frankly, salespeople have good intelligence. We hire them because we're persuasive and charismatic, and because they can get things done. And those are the kind of people we want to have on our team as we're trying to improve the company's business. So having the proper compensation model that achieves that objective makes all of our lives easier, more productive, and a lot more successful.
So let me give you a case study. I was talking to a distributor, and he said, gee, business stinks, so we're trying to get our salespeople to call on a different category of customer. There's government stimulus. So we're going out and bidding on this stuff, and where these contractors used to get 3 or 4 bids, they're now getting 25, including ours. And I said, well, gee, it sounds like if you win, maybe you don't, because the margin dollars in the order may actually less than the total cost to serve. So you actually lose money, and then you have to finance incremental inventory and receivables. This guy's got a little bit of a balance sheet debt with the bank problem. And but if the salespeople were, and you can model activity-based costing, or you know, the cost to serve a customer on a proposed project, you can actually look in advance and say, well, would I make any money in these terms or not? If I wouldn't, I'm not pursuing that. So preventatively, we don't want to go chase empty or losing margin dollars, but if we pay a % of margin dollars, they will go get every margin dollar out there, whether it's worth having or not. And when you go talk with a customer, they'll say, well, here's the deal. And you could say, well, wait a minute. If you could change this and do this a little bit, then I can do this. In other words, if you will help me lower my cost to serve, I can give you a lower price because I've lowered my cost to serve you even more than the price discount, so I can still make money, is sort of what would be going on. But right now, it's let me shoot prices at product volume. And when a salesperson comes and says, look, I got last look. If we meet the price, it's mine, ours. Well, they're going to get paid some commission, even though the company probably is going to lose some money in that kind of scenario. So we want the salespeople ideally to take the next level beyond product selling at a price and say, hey, let's go do win-win supply chain selling. Next.
Absolutely. Okay, so the only real point from this slide is it also helps avoid the makeups and devices that we've built into the programs that sort of help simulate things and where we want to get to by taking us all the way home. Okay, Bruce, you want to sum up for us here?
But what you're starting to realize is that there is a kind of a chronological layering total service process to the WayPoint service. First you outsource the huge challenge of how do we come up with an optimal, not too simple, not too complicated, crush their own weight, an optimal cost model plan. So, WayPoint basically sort of authors that. You get to be the editors and tweak it into it and, troubleshoot it and so forth. So you get something that's stable and you're happy with as far as profit loss per line item that you can sum up to get your ranking reports, which is the second point. Once you're the ranking reports, by focusing on the extremes and say, don't lose the super best. In fact, let's do that even better and deeper, and let's go look at the super losers. Why are they super losers, and how do we turn lead to gold? That brings in the next point of what we call sort of strategic, because it's high leverage, where we make our money, lose our money, incremental innovation profit plays. And that will help us to convert channel friction that we didn't see before that exists between our suppliers and us and our customers and us into lose-lose to win-win kind of opportunities. And so everybody wins. But when you go after the plays, on the next slide, presumably, you need tracking reports. And so we did look at one, the 5x5, and behind the 5x5 are a number of plays, more to core, lead to gold, et cetera. But people might say, well, yeah, these are plays, but we've never really done this stuff before, and we're not sure we know how. So the educational support from our DVD training programs, our literature, et cetera, will help to provide the incremental skills that you need to actually go make these plays work. But then on the sort of the top of this layered cake, you realize the icing is going from margin-based commissions, which just locks in reps to keep doing what they're doing and resist all changes, to getting everybody aligned to improving profits, and in many cases on a win-win basis with our channel partners. So, really the last thing you ever want to do is to design an incentive plan, and that is going to be totally guided by rethinking all of the layers underneath. But then that incentive plan is like, turbo extra backup spark plug plus, jumpstart, energy. And so it's obviously a very important catalyst if everything below is all in alignment. So you're really, with WayPoint service, you're subscribing to a total process where there's support for every single step of the way.
Absolutely. Okay, so we sort of set the preamble for this and talked about what the benefits of going to an NBC comp plan is, and we can lay out some of the logic there. Now I want to start talking about how you go about designing a plan. And what there's an awful lot of aspects that we can cover in this, and from my experience, Bruce's experience, and we know that there's a lot of detail we can get into. You're going to know a lot of these things as well. But we want to touch on the things that are important to consider in doing this and take a look at how we'd actually go about doing it, working out the transitions. So the first thing I want to do is lead off by talking about the elements of a good comp design. And ultimately, it's helpful to have these points in mind as we start going through putting a plan together, so we could do an efficient, effective, and professional job. And point one is in selling, when we're looking at sales comp, it's important to remember that what we're supposed to be doing is paying for persuasion. Because the distribution business as a whole is reasonably mature, a lot of the companies are represented today here. Your company may have quite a good deal of history, and I can tell you that we have not only companies that go back 20, 30, 40 years. We have companies on the line that go back more than a century, and these companies have traditions and practices that have sort of evolved over time. And unfortunately, in the sales force, too often we have evolved from the early days where we are paying people to go and get us new business to a point where we have a lot of business, we're reaching saturation, and we're paying people to replace people that are leaving. And people are getting out of persuading accounts to buy from us or buy more from us, and more just being responsible for maintaining accounts. It's not the same skill set, and too often we're paying too much for people to basically get an early retirement plan inside the company. And so remembering again that we're supposed to be paying for persuasion is important as a first principle. Second thing we want to do is we want to protect the top reps' earnings. There's always a concern that if we do something that's going to alienate or aggravate the sales force, that they'll stop performing their proper function in the company. And certainly we want the people that are most productive to continue to be so. And it's important to make sure that whatever we do balances the plan out properly, so the protection of the most productive reps responsible for the most profitable accounts is a given. Third principle is we want to share but not give the profits away to the sales force. And having NBC measurements or metrics gives us a real insight into that for the first time. And across the WayPoint universe, we'll look at some stats in a few moments, but we have an idea of what those kinds of levels are for starting points, and they may vary for different companies, but we definitely want to find a way of equitably sharing the fruits of their labors, the fruits of our labors when we're producing customer purchases. We want to protect against runaway commissions. We want to make sure that we don't have defects in our plan that give us hard or issues by somebody walking a $10 gazillion deal, and we have to find on doing it because our comp plan doesn't account for it properly. We also want to be able to stay within budget, and doing proper top-down planning, which we'll talk about in a moment, is one of the ways we can make sure that whatever we do in our comp plan doesn't blow the budget or the company's numbers. Finally, we want to make the sales force self-managing by making sure that we're protecting the best people almost at the expense of the deadwood, so that people that don't belong in the sales force will actually find better positions for themselves somewhere else where they're better suited without us having to take the action ourselves. And a good compensation plan is always going to help people that are mismatched to the role realize that through pay, and it's not, they're not where they ought to be. And in doing these things together and in the way that we shape the plan, we can also give ourselves and the company performance insurance. And that principle is all about making sure, realizing that we're going to have over and underperformers in the mix, and that we have a plan in place that drives and rewards the top performers to overperform sufficiently to make up for the underperformance of the people on the lower part of the list. If we do that effectively, then we will always make our numbers. We will never have a situation where people under us are doing okay, some of them are not, but we can never make our own numbers. The company can't make its numbers. So is actually going to give us effectively performance insurance. A few stats to share with you from the WayPoint universe. We went and looked at a couple of $1 billion worth of our clients' data, and we can tell you that and we divided out between the portion of that data that was commissionable sales or commission sales and how much as opposed to the total data pool that we were looking at. Gross margin runs about 19.5% across the WayPoint universe on the commission sales. It's about a point lower for the other sales. That's probably not too surprising. Sales compensation as a percentage of GP runs about 18%, and that's probably lower than a lot of people pay when they're in their commission sales. But we have people in the universe that don't pay commissions. They just have people on salaries, and those are factored in as well, and that affects the percentages here. And we have people that operate on lower margins and higher margins in the pool. Now, it's not a scientific sample, but it's a pretty broad sample, and it may give you some things that you can compare with. On all sales, it runs about 13.4%. Sales comp as a percentage of NBC runs between 49.9 and 59.9%, and that's just the effective rates. There's comparatively few people that have moved to net profit compensation yet. It's a pretty new thing in the universe. But we still work out the rates of what people are paying effectively on their NBC, and it's running between 50 and 60%. And so, if all things were equal and everybody converted to an NBC program tomorrow that paid exactly their reps exactly what the reps are making right now, they'd be paying about 60% of their NBC out to the reps on average. Okay, so let's start talking about how to do a good comp design. One of the things that is very important is that you take a look at the design and work it from the top down. I'm embarrassed to say that before I got a good education on this, before I had the benefit of experience in this. I did what I think most people did. They looked at whatever commission they were paying and their friends were paying, their competitors were paying, and sort of tweaked a little bit from there. And then maybe added a few bells and whistles on it to be able to try and drive people a little bit in some direction. But a good comp design, professional design, is done top down. What you'll do is you'll look at your total compensation budget for, say, 2009. You'll look at those dollars and you'll say, is this the right amount to pay? Sometimes you'll say, no, it's not. We're paying too much. We're going to reduce it by a couple of points. Sometimes we'll say, well, we could afford more. But you'll start out with a compensation budget. Then what you'll do is you'll divide that budget into incentive and base, and that's what we call mix. It's basically the proportion of the total compensation that's going to be paid out in base salaries and how much is going to be at-risk pay or paid out as incentives. Now, a lot of people say, we're in straight commission, we don't have bases, but when we take a deeper look at our clients, that's seldom true, because most people, even when they have straight commission plans, have people that are starting up and they need a draw until they get going, or they need a base salary for the first year. They have these things that effectively are base salaries. The market drives in that direction. They have to have them, but they just don't recognize them. And that's problematic, because if you're not recognizing them, you can't plan them properly, and you can't use them for things that they're helpful in doing. So, and there's a number of things that you look at in deciding how you do the mix, and it could be 60-40, it could be 50-50, it could be 0-10, it could be 10-90. How you break it up, one way or another, has to do with a number of different factors. And we can get into that in detail, and in fact we do with our clients. And we also have professional people that work with us that can really guide you in doing those things if you'd like to have them come in and assist you. But essentially, you're looking at the length of the sale, whether it's a team sale or individual, or some point of the spectrum in between. You're looking at whether the product is on the growth side of the curve, or if it's in steady state maintenance or declining. These things all affect how you think about the mix, and you can also use the mix for things like geographic differentials or territory balancing. So there's a number of things that you can use the base mix number for. So once you've divided it off and you say, okay, well, we're having off this amount and we're going to use that to divide out and pay out the base salaries where we pay base salaries, then you know how many incentive dollars you have left. And then you take the incentive dollars and then you can decide that you'll reserve some of that for strategic initiatives, spiffs, non-production related items, and then have the rest of it being your core incentive. And when I'm talking about non-production, production measures have to do with what they produce. In this case, the production measure is NBC, so you'll tie the commission to the NBC amount. So you might wind up taking, say, reserving 10% of your incentive program and using it for strategic things or non-production. The rest of it will just be tied to the NBC, and you'll use that to set your commission rates. When you have those amounts, you know what the commission rates need to be as a baseline, and then you can tweak them from there to balance your plan out. The other part, the strategic incentives, go off to non-production measures. So it could be KPIs, key performance indicators. An example that I worked on some time ago was we had a company that distributed, but they distributed through retailers, grocery retailers, in fact. And it was important for them to get their products into set up in displays or on end caps in there. They weren't going to count on the retailers to do all this. So what they did is it was a big win for them if they could get a product placement in a store, because that would drive sales for the store and also demonstrate to the store that the product was valuable to have and could make a permanent placement. So they took a certain amount of their incentive plan and tied it to the number of stores that the reps were able to get the product into. And that wasn't a direct production measure. It was actually a KPI, but it gave them some way of hiving off some of the incentive plan. And because it came out of the total pool, it wasn't an add-on that wound up inflating their budget where they wound up spending more on comp than they intended to because they were doing top-down planning. So this could work, if you had a $5 million, you could say, I got a 60-40 mix, and we take $2 million and send that to the base for bases, and we can have a higher base in Manhattan than we do in Butte, Montana, where the cost of living is different. We could have more base salaries up in the inside sales team that handle more customers on a lower basis, and they only get a small commission, whereas we have lower bases for our hunter-killer sales guys out there. So you can decide what you're going to do with the bases. Then they had a $3 million incentive budget, and they could just take the $3 million. They could take 10% off and hold it for special and strategic initiatives, and they got $2.7 million left. They divide $2.7 million into last year's NBC, and they know what the commission rate is that they have to pay. And that'll pay out exactly $2.7 million on the same performance that the company had last year. And if the incentive is tied to NBC, it doesn't matter if they go over, because they will go over. They'll wind up paying out more than $2.7 million, but on a dollar-for-dollar basis, every dollar that they pay out in sales incentives, they get $2 back in bottom line profit before compensation. So any increases that the sales force drives by improving the business is fully funded out of incremental profitability. And that means even though we wind up paying out more than $2.7 million in incentives later on, we bring in enough money that the company overperforms its objectives as well. And so doing a top-down design is very, very important to being able to meet a number of those objectives.
Let me just jump in here and sort of tell you what you're sort of observing. You have to realize Randy is got about 5 PhDs from the School of Hard Knocks. 3 or 4 of them have come from being a serial entrepreneur, hitting it out of the park, 10 baggers and fizzling here and there. But one of them, for a period of time, he actually was doing incentive compensation consulting. So when you buy the WayPoint service, you sort of get virtual Bruce and virtual Randy for whatever we can contribute. So you can see he's got a wonderful expertise in this area. Also, as you look at these slides, you're doing these budgets, think about what is my power of understanding. And maybe from a metaphorical viewpoint, you could be using your naked eye, or you could have a microscope, a telescope, high-powered microscope, high-powered telescope, or MRI. So as imagine in the Civil War, it's a battle site. You've got hacksaws and stuff like that. But with WayPoint, because you basically got MRI, real time, all the time, click, click, click down, you can look at down to the whatever detail you want in the economic anatomy of your business. On the NBC plan, you can actually tune incentive rates to the small customer niches, or it could be a niche of one. So you can even tune it to the customer level based on what the customer wants. I mean, there's some big customers that say, this is how you're going to do business with us, whether you like it or not. And it may mean a lot of different, extra services and so forth. How does the rep fit in that, and what's their incentive for doing so? You can tune that exactly in a different, exceptional way, literally on an account-by-account basis. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we sort of have our budgets and have our factors put together, then we have to start thinking about how we transition from where we are to where we want to be. And so what we want to do is we want to design a plan that keeps most everyone whole. We want to make sure that the top reps are protected and that we're not going to impose something that's going to cause chaos and disruption in the selling process. One of the powerful tools that we can use is territory realignments. We can remove accounts that are dragging reps down and dragging the company down altogether, and the reps are going to, like I showed you before, Vonda had that $356 loss. If that's a chronic loser, she's going to be asking you to take the account off her hands. And it may be that if you just don't have to pay comp on it, or you can handle it inside, or you can change the service model for that customer, you can turn it into a net winner without Vonda burning up time on it. And that's as an alternative to you and Vonda getting out there and working on the account to change it into a win-win situation between you and the account to be able to service it in a different way, sending it out, the orders out once a week rather than 3 times a week, those kinds of things. We urge you to disclose everything when you're going through the transition step, and that's part of the communication things we get in. But, show the people the upside, the downside, and show them exactly what's going on in the accounts and with their pay, so that they can see what's coming down the pike, and you can make it happen. We recommend that you use transitional rate steps, and we'll show you all of these things in a moment. And then we can also use territory adjustments. And I'll tell you what the difference between realignments and adjustments is in just a moment. All right, so we want to start looking at the transitional rates, and we have a number of different reps here that make different points. One of the first things that we'd recommend is that we start looking at individual reps, and we can start off at the beginning of the program by just preserving their legacy rates. And there's 2 ways that we can do this. One is that we can pick a rep. For instance, we can pick Shiloh here. Well, let me find somebody a little bit better. Here's Francie, and she's about 49.6%. She's doing pretty well. She's within the range. And this is a rep that's generating some pretty good profits for the company. We've got 42,000 NBC here. She's doing pretty well. It's only costing us $21,000 to get it. And this is a good deal. And for Francie, we can decide, okay, well, your new rate is 50, and you get a bit of a bump. Or we could just say, our calculated rate is 60, and we're going to put you on 60%. And you're going to get a bit of a raise because you've been doing a good job. We get down here to Vonda. She might be doing pretty well, the same kind of deal. We come down to Nicolette. She's running 71%. It's a pretty small market. Well, we'll just say we have a rep that's running 71%. We could go to the rep and say, look, starting implementation day, whenever that is, you're going to go to 70% NBC. At the end of the following quarter, we're going to go to 65% NBC, and at the end of the year, we're going to go to 60%, so you're on the same rate as everyone else. And what's going to happen is in the first quarter, you're going to 70%. That's pretty much what you're making right now. And then you and I are going to team up for a quarter, and we're going to reform or remove the money-losing accounts, so that by the time we get to the end of the quarter, 60% or 65% or whatever the rate is the right amount, a right rate for you to make the money you're making now. And so we're going to roll up our sleeves together and get out there and make this happen. If you get to somebody like Leanna up here, who's taking all of the profit of the territory, that's clearly not sustainable. So what we may do with her is pull her individual report, and let me give you an example how that might happen. I'm going to switch over right now to a desktop tool, which is part of WayPoint, that allows a customer to be able to get the information they need to be able to calculate the compensation commissions. And this is a cool little tool. It has all the sales reps listed in here, and they have the base salaries and what their individual commission rates are. And we can pick a time frame, tell it what reports we want to run, and then this reaches out through a secure encrypted back channel to WayPoint and pulls the information down and produces an Excel workbook. And I'll just show you what that looks like right here. I'll switch over to Excel so you can see it. Okay, so Excel opens up, and then in the back of Excel it pulls all the things in and makes you a workbook with tabs for all of the reps. And so for November of 2008, which is the time frame I picked here, I have a tab for each one of the reps that I can use to, it calculates their commissions, and I can print it out and send it to them with their commission check so they can see what's going on. And I'm just trying to find Joe Posey here, who unfortunately he's a big dog, but he's losing us a lot of money. And he's kind of a special case, and I'll give you some insight to what we would do with him. Let me just see if I can lock in his titles here, so we can scroll this. But if we scroll down to the bottom, we can see if we just move him directly onto a 60% plan, his pay is going to go way, way, way down. And he's only going to make $1,300, and usually he makes $7,000 or something like that. The reason why is he's been around for a long time. He's accumulated a lot of money losing small accounts, which he really can't get out to call on, and it doesn't have the bandwidth to go and reform. And he's got some big money losing accounts, which we do want to get him focused on. So the first thing we would do with Joe sitting down with him is say, look, you got a whole bunch of accounts in the middle that are making or losing you not much, and they're generating very little. And what we'd like to do is we'd like to relieve you of a bunch of these accounts and move them into house accounts or move them to our inside sales crew, or whatever the case may be, and we'll be able to, take that out of the mix, and then it gets a boost there. Then we're going to look at some of the money losing, some of the small accounts here that are, just nuisance level accounts, and we'll take a few more of those out, say all the ones under $1,000 in the month. Okay, so now we've got him from $1,300 up to $2,200 by just basically converting some of his accounts into house accounts, all of which he's totally for, because every time you relieve him of one, his pay starts to recover back to where it was. Then we take a look at these bottom accounts and say, well, here's a customer that cost you $800 out of your commission check last month. We're going to team up together and go do something about it. But for now, we're going to go back to that transitional plan. And Joe, this is what you'd be like on 60, but what we're going to do is we're going to pay you at 80. And that'll get keep your NBC up to the rate where it's preserving your pay for the next quarter, while we take some time to work together and either lose some of these small accounts or can convert the biggest money-losing accounts into money-making accounts so they're contributing to your paycheck. So we have a coaching opportunity and an ability to get there without just hammering Joe off the top. But by year's end, we can have everybody on 60% NBC. We can dedicate a lot more of our sales management time into coaching to get this along the way. And we can get focused on converting some of our money-losing customers into money-making ones. And Bruce is the master tactician for the whole distribution industry on what kinds of things you can do with that. And we'll work with you and your team so that your people know what those tactical plans are, and we can help you get through through this transitional period, being fully armed not only with the information on what's going on, but the information required to pay accurately and the tactical plan to be able to help the reps convert their business into something that makes sense for everyone. Okay, so we looked at the comp report. We looked at what happens with different kinds of reps, and we looked at the comp tool. And the whole thing is, there's a few steps for putting together an effective plan design. But I cannot stress enough that, from my background, and, I spent a decade doing, working on high-end sales compensation plans exclusively for the Fortune 100. And the difference between a plan that was succeeded and a plan that failed was how well it was communicated once it was designed. So it's very, very important to make sure that you get good, you have a good rollout plan, you have good information to be able to roll out to introduce it so you can bring people on board. And again, we'll help you with that kind of thing. Okay, I'm going to open it up for Q&A. At the end of the thing, we'll tell you about the things we're going to send out, and with time allowing, I'll show you a little bit about what WayPoint does and is. We've only really scratched the surface on this, and we're more than happy to rerun this presentation for your senior team. We can run a WayPoint demonstration for your senior team. We can all do those individually for you on request. And we can talk more about comp design and about quantum profit management. So I'm just going to open it up. For those of you that have put your little PIN number in your phone, then you'll be able to speak as soon as I unmute you here. For those of you who have not typed a PIN number in your phone, you're going to see a little yellow balloon. And if you want to participate, you need to type on your phone pound, the little PIN number, and pound, and that'll activate your ability to talk to us in the session here. Okay, questions, anybody? Anybody have any commentary on this so far?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah.
Question comes down for me. I understand. I get the system. I've been following Bruce and the quantum profit information here for some time. Where I'm having a problem is understanding how expense is going to be allocated to a particular customer.
Excellent question. What WayPoint does, what we do with WayPoint is we collect customers' transactional data. We'll pull 2 to 3 years of your invoices. We'll pull everything. So we'll have every line item on every invoice, and we'll put it on some high-performance custom servers that are built just for this purpose, that you access on a secure channel, the same kind of security the banks use. Then what we do is we collect your P&L and your cost information. And we collect it in a number of different ways. We have the broadly socialized costs, like your G&A costs, which you may just spread across the business using certain rules that you can invent, that we can develop together, and through a number of different methodologies. You can do it by as a percentage of revenue, as a percentage of gross profit, as by the invoice line, by the invoice, those kinds of things. And we'll put those costs through. We'll have more specifically tailored costs. We'll take the W-2 costs from your sales force, and we'll put the W-2 costs of each rep on the transactions that rep drives. So an invoice from that rep will have a line on it, and somewhere in there will be the amount of will be a proportion of the compensation that was paid for that rep for that transaction, and that rep cost won't go on other transactions, only on his own. We'll take your warehouse costs, and you may have individual warehouses. We'll take the cost of each one of the warehouses and put it on the transactions that flow through that warehouse. And if you have a direct ship that doesn't go through the warehouse, it won't carry any warehouse cost at all. And we'll take it right down to the level where individual customers may be using credit cards, and who doesn't have those these days? And we'll take the credit card discounts that those customers are collecting, or they're costing you, and we'll put those right on the transactions for that particular customer. And we can do this for rebates. We can do this for credit card discounts, early payment discounts, for assembly costs in your operation, for specialized costs that you have for specific parts of the business. We can break it all down and put it on all these transactions that do that. Once we've done that in WayPoint, we know quite a lot, because on every line item we know the revenue and the cost of goods, therefore the gross profit. We know how much sales expense there was, if any. We know how much warehouse expense, if any, how much fleet expense, if any, how much freight in, if any, how much assembly cost, if any. And so we know the net profit exactly on that particular line. And two lines, two invoices from two different customers with the same product, the same price, the same gross profit might have very different net profits, because one of them might be in a direct ship from the manufacturer or for the house account. Another one could have had a sales commission, could have gone out in 3 trucks, could have been manually entered rather than coming in through the web or EDI. And we know this. Once we know this, we know everything. We can roll those things up to the rep, to the territory, to the customer, to the SKU, to the product line, to the vendor, to the process, to the shipping type.
I might add that what you want to do is ultimately get to basically efficiently complicated, good enough rendering of what the profitability roughly is for all these elements in your business. People will say, well, wait a minute, I can nitpick this item and da-da-da-da-da-da, and that means that really this account didn't lose $100,000, it only lost 95 or something like that. But when you look at the range of assumptions you can make, you realize, well, yeah, but we're still losing somewhere between 80,000 and 115,000, for example, so why don't we get on with the job and turn this lead account into gold? And what people really want to do is to nitpick and say this isn't perfection for a complex dynamic system, and of course it never will be. Therefore, let's just keep what we know, which is this dysfunctional, misaligned system that freezes us in the past with all these drawbacks to it, as opposed to, wait a minute, if we can get this new environment where everybody is aligned and we can actually, proactively together all go out and run the plays and sit behind the 555, we're going to grow profits dramatically, and compensation is going to go up too. So, and another sort of unspoken assumption is, well, wait a minute, I'm the CFO, and our balance sheet has to balance to the penny. Well, that's what accountants do, and so forth. That doesn't necessarily mean that sort of standard would apply to how are we going to grow our business together. So, but you go back and Randy authors something, you edit it, you look at the extremes, and if something looks out of line, you go back and look at the assumptions, and you can tweak them around. Because one of our clients said, it's like a bathtub full of ping pong balls. No matter what we do, every dime of cost is in there, and if you want to push one ping pong down and say, I don't want that much expense allocated to this customer or my territory or whatever, other ping pong balls have to go up. Where else are you going to sock that cost to, because it's going to make somebody else look bad? And so most people want to just keep what they're doing. That's really what they want to do.
Other questions, comments?
Randy and Bruce?
Yes.
Hi, this is Gary Prorock, Radner Smith & Company. How you doing?
Hi, Gary.
Very good.
Nice to talk to you.
I enjoyed the seminar. The question I have is inevitably, and it's partially addressed in the previous comments, but inevitably we'll have salesmen saying, well, I think the costs you're using are too high. We've got an inventory control person. I don't think we need an inventory control person. You've got sales, customer service reps. That guy's working on such and such most of the time, and that six-member staff shouldn't be allocated in the way you're allocating it. Your utility costs are too high. You need new windows in the place, but we don't want to pay for them. Things like that. I think there's going to be, or I know there's going to be arguments that it's not controlling costs, and therefore they're passing these costs on to us, and therefore my commission is lower because we're doing NBC on these inefficiencies.
Great question. Comes up all the time. And when we're in these meetings doing these rollouts, this is my answer. I said, first of all, I'm paid on this the same as you're paid on this. So you can bet that I'm doing everything I can to squeeze those costs out as well, because because you and I are paid the same way. That's number one. Number two, you have big levers on here. You have a lot more control than you realize. You're the guy that comes in and says, this customer needs a truck a day. If we have to have a truck a day, we're going out and buying a truck and hiring the driver to be able to do that. You instead change the deal so we don't need a truck a day, then we're not hiring that person or buying that truck. And if you cut down the number of trucks enough, we're going to find our worst driver and our worst truck and get rid of it, because that's in my interest as well as yours. So I'll make this commitment to you. You do what you can to reduce this. I'll make sure that we deliver on the back end.
I would also say, let's not think of our sales force monolithically. If you ranked all your salespeople, put them in three piles: superstar, money motivated, and really customers love them, as opposed to, this guy was in the right place at the right time. He inherited accounts. He wouldn't ask for any more business for fear of rocking the boat. High empathy, low ego drive, really not even money motivated, fantastically well fed, and maybe it actually just kind of goes where people get orders, and so he tends to become a small customer, small order kind of creature. When you go read my article 4.11, and most of you will realize you have too many salespeople trying to cover what I call B and C customers, where the service model doesn't work. And you think, well, wait a minute, what if I let go of one sales rep who was just, frankly, a small order, small customer guy sitting on big upside potential in the few accounts they inherited, and not even calling on the other big accounts that are in their territory. I could then take those best accounts with great upside and give them to my best guy and trade them for the B's and C's and get best guys calling best accounts, etc. So under the new plan, your best guys, you can tune it any way you want. They're not going to make any less money. In fact, they're going to make more money because you're working together on the right accounts in harmony as opposed to not. So don't think of your sales force monolithically. Think of it in sort of piles and realize that this gives you total flexibility to move forward. You could, I mean, if you want to play a debate tactic, you can turn around and say, all right, well then why don't you defend to me all the dysfunctions of the current system? And they say, well, I can't. I mean, they're there, they're dysfunctional, I see it, I know it, everybody knows it. So, the assumption is if I can nitpick the new plan, then let's keep the old plan, which is perfect. Well, actually, no, it's on a balance scale, it's even worse. So, it's on a balance scale, moving to harmony and focus and win-win-win economics is a much better, environment.
Yeah, and we've got good tactics to deal with these kinds of common questions that come up, and if you're moving on to an NBC comp plan with us, we're there to help you with the launch and the rollout, and to be able to help you field these questions, so that
incidentally,
there's not much that we haven't heard on these fronts.
Incidentally, knowing Gary's environment, where they have a lot of brokerage business and his particular channel and his business, you find out that different customers have different service intensities, and you're going to do what the customer wants, and the ability to tune the commission or the incentive portion of the pay to that service intensity, you can do that with MRI, strategic laparoscopic precision, and so that you're not going to run the risk of way overpaying somebody who inherited an account and is not doing really much for the account. I ran an account the other day where a guy, it's a huge profitable customer for a distributor, and the sales is prohibited. You cannot call more often than 4 times a year. Well, what does it say about what the salesman is doing to build the bottom line for that account? And how long is that going to last? Where you're going to pay the guy $5,000 a sales call and commission before the customer says, you know what, this is a joke. I don't want to see the guy, and I want his commission as a form of a lower price. There are those kinds of issues that come with exceptional customers. Well, how do you take care of exceptional customer problems in a current general plan, one size fits all? Whereas this plan can be tuned literally to the customer if you wanted to.
Yeah. Other questions? Anybody hear something we said that just sounds plain wrong?
I'm hearing voices.
Yeah, there's a few people I can't quite tell who the background's coming from. Let's see if I can isolate it. Yeah, not sure. There's somebody that's not muted. If you're not speaking with us and don't intend to, if you wouldn't mind muting us, that would be appreciated. All right, so let's then go to the wrap-up then. So we're going to follow up with all of you. Everybody that was on the webinar today is going to get a follow-up email in the next 24 hours. We're going to send you quite a number of things that you may find useful. First of all, we'll share the webinar slide deck with you so that you can use it for your own notes or for doing your internal presentations if you'd like. We are also going to send you Bruce's article on NBC Comp, and it's a professorial level document that lays out a lot of the logic and mathematics of this, and could be pretty helpful for you to use as for your own presentations going forward. We're also going to provide you information on WayPoint so that you have a little bit more insight into what WayPoint does and looks like. We'll send you a sample of the QPM newsletter. QPM is Quantum Profit Management, and it's all about best practices in management. And there's a website for that called quantumprofitmanagement.com. We'll send you the link for that as well, which contains a couple of dozen of these newsletters that Bruce has authored. They're single one-pager, easy-to-read things that will give you ideas on things you can do going forward. We'll send you links to the Merrifield and WayPoint websites as well as the Quantum Profit Management website. Merrifield has a wealth of information on best practices. There's several decades worth of writing and thinking there, and it's a huge resource. We'll get you there. And I invite you to book a private NBC Comp Design webinar. We'd be happy to participate with you, trying to put one of these things together or to discuss it further with your internal team. We'd like to encourage you also to book a WayPoint demo to take a look at WayPoint itself. We haven't shown you hardly anything of it this morning. We just showed you some of the reports that come out of it. But I think some of the things in there would be very exciting for you to see. And then, of course, we'll have information on upcoming webinars. If there's anybody that receives mail for us and doesn't want to, please just let us know. We'll certainly make sure that we don't bother you with, because we don't want to be generating spam. But if you're interested in the things that come up, when we send you, we only send you things when we have something of interest for you, not necessarily things that we're trying to sell you. So we're always developing new information, and if you'd like to be on our list, we're more than happy to include you. We have a series of webinars that you can look at. We have Quantum Profit Management. We have the Radical Profit Improvement Plays. Quantum Profit Management is best practices and principles and a new way of thinking that will give you new insights in how you do business. Radical Profit Improvement Plays is all about the tactical plans for converting, for dealing with particular problems that you have in the business, converting money-losing accounts into money-making accounts. And it's really helpful for sales management. We have NBC Sales Comp Design webinar, which you've just had here. And then there's an upcoming series of tools and techniques for business improvement VPs. And we're assembling a 2-day course for companies that are far enough progressed that they actually have people dedicated to process improvement. And we'll be launching that series in the near future, and we'll let you have information on that. We urge you to send your people out to get education on tactics and plans, how to go about driving your business in new ways and driving profits into your business. I want to thank you, Bruce, for spending your morning with us. It's hard to catch Bruce when he's not on an airplane somewhere. And I want to thank all of you for coming in and speaking with us this morning or taking the time to listen to this. I'd be delighted to spend any time with any one of you after the webinar or in the coming days or weeks. By all means, we'll have contact information in the email that comes out and contacts us directly. I'm delighted to talk to you about your business situation. At any rate, thanks all, and have a great morning.
Bye-bye.